Let me tell you about an $11,000 mistake I once made. Today we're going to talk about real estate inspections. We'll discuss the different categories of inspections, the most common types of inspections that real estate investors get, and how to use inspections. And make sure you stick around till the end because I'll tell you about a time when I took a 5-figure hit to my renovation budget. So what is an inspection? A real estate inspection is a professional evaluation of a property to determine its condition. A trained inspector goes through the property and looks at everything to see if there are any potential or existing issues you need to be aware of. And this is usually done right before or during the sales process of a property. Oftentimes the buyer is the one getting the inspection to see what they're walking into with the property. So let's talk about the categories of inspections. There are a lot of different types of property inspections you can get, but they kind of fall into 3 general buckets: general inspections, specialty inspections, and environmental or health inspections. Now, these can vary quite a bit whether we're talking about small multifamily and single family versus larger multifamily versus commercial properties or land. So today we'll focus primarily on the types of inspections you'd see if you're buying a 1 to 4 unit building. Just know that there are a bunch out there, and I can't even cover all the ones you would use for a single family home, let alone all the other types of real estate assets. But we'll go over some of the most common ones today. The first bucket of inspections is general inspections. So if you've ever had an inspection on a house, you probably understand what this means. This is when an inspector comes through and just kind of looks at the entire house, top to bottom, as much as possible to see if there's anything you should be worried about or budgeting for. Inspectors usually, when they're doing a general home inspection, will look at almost everything, but some things might be left out, or it might be kind of a cursory look. You would need a specialty inspection to really dig into the details of maybe the roof, plumbing, electric, things like that. But generally, in one of these inspections, the home inspector is looking at just about everything to at least give you an idea of whether or not you need to look at anything further. And they're going to be checking all the taps, seeing if the kitchen faucet's turning on, seeing if there's leaks underneath. They're going to look at the flooring, at the walls, at the roof, everything that they can see. And many times these days, inspectors have little drones that they can use to get up and see the roof, even if they're not the ones who are going up on it themselves. So a general home inspection really covers a lot. Now, there are also general inspections like this for multifamily and commercial. It's a slightly different thing. Maybe a different inspector would come and do those, but it's the same idea. They're just kind of looking across everything as best they can to give you an idea if there are any areas you need to dig in further. Now, another type of inspection to be aware of in this general category is what I call a walk and talk inspection. This is kind of the same as a general inspection, except it's a little quicker, and they're not going to generate a full detailed report like they usually do. This is basically something they do for investors to help save time and money for both parties when investors want to get eyes on a property, but maybe they don't have time to go through the full inspection process. Maybe the seller is in a situation where no matter what, they're not going to give concessions on very much as a sale. An inspector is just coming through to give you an idea. Is there anything to be aware of? Any watch outs on kind of first glance? But a walk and talk is going to be kind of shorter and sweeter, and there's not going to be a written report. It's really to help an investor determine, can they move forward? Is the risk worth the reward on this particular property? So those are your general inspections. Specialty inspections, and as it sounds, this is when you bring in an inspector or maybe a licensed plumber, electrician, roofer, whomever, to look specifically at one component of the home in more depth. Might include a foundation inspection by a structural engineer. So if you're a general inspector and notices some cracking you need to be worried about, then you might call in the structural engineer for that specialty foundation inspection. You might call a roofer, plumber, or electrician to look at any of those components of the home, maybe an HVAC specialist. And then if you have certain specialty items or situations on a property, like a well or septic, or maybe a pool, or you have a chimney that needs to be inspected, things like that would all be considered specialty inspections. And oftentimes you're starting with the general inspection, and then if something's noted on there that needs a little further information, then you call in someone to do a specialty inspection. One specialty inspection that I think most of the times investors and homeowners are getting even before the general inspector goes through is a sewer lateral inspection. It requires someone to come in with a scope to look into that sewer lateral pipe and make sure everything's looking good. There are no roots growing in there. There's no crumbling or areas that have collapsed. So sewer lateral is one of the specialty inspections that oftentimes people are getting even before a general inspector says anything about it. But those are some of the most common specialty inspections. The third category of inspections is environmental or health inspections. So this would include things like pest inspections. More specifically, there are termite and wood destroying insect inspections that you can get. You might get a radon inspection, a lead-based paint inspection, asbestos inspection. A lot of these things have to do with the environment and then things that could affect people's health down the road. So it depends on the situation and where you live. For instance, a radon inspection is more common in areas with basements, but all of these are things to consider when you're looking at a property. Okay, so there are general home inspections, specialty inspections, and environmental health inspections. And across those three categories, I probably listed 15 to 20 different types of inspections overall. Are you supposed to get all of those? No. I don't think so. In most cases, you might be getting 2 to 3 of those. And here are the ones that I think are the most common for real estate investors to get. A general home inspection, a sewer lateral inspection, and a termite or wood destroying insect inspection. The reason that these are the most common is because obviously the general inspection is a total overview. In most cases, they're going to look at everything at least to some degree, and then they can let you know if you need to follow on with any specialty inspections. The sewer lateral, as I mentioned earlier when we talked about specialty inspections, is one of those that requires some specialized equipment, and that's one of the things that general home inspectors almost never do. So having that sewer lateral scoped when you're doing inspections is really important. And then the reason for that third termite wood destroying insect inspection is because if you're using any sort of VA or FHA loan, many times this is required by those loans. So if you're planning to house hack and you're going to use one of those loans, you're going to need to get one of these anyway. On top of that, these types of wood destroying insects can actually have a real effect on the structural integrity of a property if they're eating through important beams and joists. So it's much more important than maybe just a general pest inspection to look at termite and wood destroying insects. So I would say that those three, general home inspection, sewer lateral inspection, and termite wood destroying insect inspection, are the three most common ones that I see real estate investors get. So how do you use inspections? One of the most important ways to use an inspection is to help you with understanding your renovation costs. It can really help you tighten up your budget to have an inspector come through and point out things that maybe you didn't see yourself as you walk through the property. They might even catch things that your contractor didn't catch. So it can help you with budgeting for your renovation for sure. On top of that, you could be catching hidden costs that could really blow up a deal. So if you have an inspection contingency in place when you're buying a property, this is a contingency in your contract that says, hey, if something pops up on an inspection, I can renegotiate or I can back out. So if you catch something, some hidden cost that's really going to kill the deal for you, and you have an inspection contingency in place, it allows you to either back out gracefully or go back and renegotiate. Maybe ask the seller for some credits to help cover that unexpected cost that would really kill the deal for you. Finally, you don't have to be the buyer to use inspections. If you're getting ready to list a property, you could also preemptively get an inspection to help prepare you for listing it in the strongest way possible. You might get a full general home inspection or specifically a sewer lateral scope if you know that that's a big issue in your area, if you're dealing with a lot of older housing especially, or you might just do a quick walk and talk to identify any major red flags that might pop up in the future. So you don't have to be the buyer necessarily. Sellers can use inspections as well to make sure that the deal will go through smoothly. A little warning before we close out this video, inspections don't catch everything. Inspectors are still humans, and even if they look at everything that's within their vision and see everything and report on everything accurately, there can still be things hidden that they don't catch because it's behind a wall or it's behind a bunch of furniture that the seller has in place and they're not able to move it. So just know that inspections are not perfect. They're not fail-safe. I promised you at the beginning of this video a story about my $11,000 whoopsie. So here's how that went down. I was buying a 4-family building with a partner. It's an old building with 2 layers of brick, and we knew that all 4 units would need some renovation work. We knew it'd even need a little bit of structural work in the basement. It was a pretty big renovation budget. I walked through it with an inspector. I also walked through it with a friend who knew the area and the real estate in that area really well, and I walked through it with my contractor. One of the things we knew we would have to do was replace lintels above the window. So it's this metal beam, and as the masons are coming and pulling out the brick above that metal lintel to replace that part, they realized that the inner layer of brick is bowing inward toward the home. This, as you can imagine, is really dangerous. It's not a good situation. So what this meant was they had to take down the top third of the front wall of that building completely, take all the brick down and re-brick from the top of those windows up. It cost $11,000, and that was one of the better quotes of the several quotes that I got. So as you can imagine, this really disrupted my budget, but it was the inner layer of brick. I couldn't see that there was anything wrong based based on the exterior brick wall. My contractor couldn't see it and my inspector couldn't see it. So what I ended up having to do was adjust course on my renovation a little bit. It was a 4-unit building. I was renovating all 4 units. That was my initial plan. By the time we found out about this issue, I realized I was going to have to pull back somewhere. Fortunately, one of the 4 tenants who had been in place wanted to stay, and she was happy with her unit as it was. So we offered, instead of completely renovating that unit, to just put an in-unit washer dryer in. That was one thing I was planning to do in all the units anyway, but I didn't do anything else to that unit. We didn't increase her rent as much as we were able to increase rent on the other units because we didn't do that renovation, but we were able to keep our overall renovation budget mostly intact because we redistributed funds from that unit to fixing that brick issue. Now, why do I tell you this story? It's not to scare you, it's just to make sure you have a realistic viewpoint going into real estate and inspections. Sometimes things aren't caught. It doesn't mean not to get into real estate. It's just part of the adventure, guys. It happens sometimes. But if you can stay flexible, if you build some buffer into your budget, and if you get creative, you can always figure it out one way or another. So don't let that scare you. Just let that be in the back of your mind as a warning to be ready for almost anything. When you figure out how to do that, you'll find that you do really well in real estate. Questions about inspections? Be sure to drop those in the comments below. Please like, subscribe, and share this video. Most importantly, keep learning, keep growing, and have fun.